Meanwhile, we are still dealing with Tropical Cyclone 6B located in the Bay of Bengal, and both the U.S. Joint Typhoon Warning Center and the India Meteorological Department are forecasting the storm to make a landfall near or just to the south of the city of Chennai. The latest regional satellite confirms that the overall structure of the cyclone has been improving over the latest 24 hours, and as we switch over to the water vapor, we still see a lot of dry air and more in the way of wind shear immediately to the west and north of the cyclone, but over the short term, the conditions do appear to be favorable for continued intensification. As we turn to the latest visible satellite animation, we can see that some significant cloud cover is passing towards Sri Lanka, where some isolated heavy rainfall can be expected over the next 24 to 48 hours, but luckily some of the more significant weather and activity should pass to the north, so that is some beneficial relief. However, we are dealing with a different scenario altogether for interests across Southeast India, where it looks as though at least a somewhat significant cyclone will be making landfall in that region within the next 2 to 3 days. Now, as we turn to the latest enhanced infrared animation, we can see that the storm has become much better organized compared to this time yesterday, with some of the deeper convection flaring near where we saw the surface circulation on the visible, and the latest water vapor shows a fairly healthy pattern with the outflow extending well away from the center, especially in the northern and western quadrants of the storm. The latest accumulated 5-day precipitation forecast from the GFS model shows much of the heaviest totals remaining offshore and over the open waters of the Bay of Bengal, but we still cannot rule out some potential for some heavy rainfall and isolated flooding along some of these coastal regions of southeast India. The latest mid to upper air products from the University of Wisconsin reveal a fairly healthy looking vorticity max at the 850 millibar level. But as we switch over to the wind shear analysis, there is some light to moderate wind shear very close to the center of circulation, and unless this favorable upper level ridge over the Bay of Bengal continues to shift more toward the west, this system will begin to run into more in the way of southerly wind shear, and any further increase in vertical wind shear could open up this system to become a little more susceptible to the dry air that is currently in place over much of India, and as soon as that dry air begins to wrap back into the center of circulation, we could see some fairly rapid weakening, especially as this storm is beginning to make landfall. But for now, all interests across much of this region should be preparing for the threat of some gusty winds that could allow for some isolated wind damage, especially to poorly built structures, along with the possibility of flooding with those heavier bands that begin to approach the coastline. And intensification should continue with this tropical cyclone for the next 48 hours, but then as the center begins to approach the coast, the system very well could weaken significantly, but as always, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So with all that said, here is a look at the latest 0Z ECMWF operational model forecast, and as we go into 24 and 48 hours, we see some re-strengthening, but really nothing overly significant over the Gulf of Carpentaria, and as we look into the northern hemisphere, our Bay of Bengal cyclone continues to intensify all the way up until the time the center is about to near the coast, and then as we go into day 3, the center is making landfall near Chennai, India, and then our system is also beginning to make landfall here near the Cape York Peninsula. Beyond that point, it looks as though the tropics are going to be relatively quiet, with nothing in the way of significant activity near the coast, although there is the possibility for some development well to the east of Madagascar. Meanwhile, the 0Z run from the GFS model is somewhat similar. However, as we start off with the 48-hour forecast, both the movement and intensification or re-intensification of what is left of Cyclone Grant is a little bit quicker. The landfall is roughly 1 day faster, and the model is showing a little more in the way of intensification over the Gulf of Carpentaria. And as we go into day 3, the system is already moving into the Coral Sea. However, this solution is probably a little bit too fast, and our system in the Bay of Bengal is continuing to near the coast, but perhaps a little bit more toward the north of where the ECMWF showed the landfall. But as we go into day 5, the system over India rapidly weakens well below tropical cyclone status, and the remnants of Grant are also beginning to weaken once again due to a little bit in the way of cooler water temperatures, but more importantly increasing northwest vertical wind